Thank you so much, C. Joshua, and thank you to all of you and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and it's my pleasure to be giving this course. This kind of material and the subject matter I've been working on for the better part of a decade, so I'm really excited to share it with you. And yeah, let's get started, inshallah. I'm gonna share the presentation. Let me know if you cannot see it. All right, let's do that.
Can you just make sure that the recording is happening on your side as well?
Okay, wait, let's not share that. Yep, yep, yep. The recording's happening. Okay, so let's do this, inshallah. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is a subject matter I've spent quite a bit of time on, and I think there's good reason for that because people are very interested in this topic. So this course is going to be based on my most recent publication that just came out at the end of last year. It's going to last for about 10 weeks. Um, why have I written this book? Well, there is a question I've been trying to answer for the better part of 10 years, and it's to do with the problem of religious pluralism. Is there possibly any truth at all to religions existing outside of Islam, and can they be included within the fold of salvation or not? If so, to what extent? And obviously, this is not a new question, and I am most certainly not the first person to have attempted this problem. But I'm trying to provide some new insights, which I don't think have happened before. And I think that's because Ibn Arabi, the Sheikh Al Akbar, otherwise known as the greatest master, is the one to do it. So, who is this course for? Um, it's for anyone who has these questions, right? If you want to know how can we relate to other religions, but in a let's say in a sincere, intelligent way, in an authentic way, not superficially, right? Like through, let's say, obligatory interreligious faith dialogues that tend to remain superficial sometimes. Uh, if you want to develop a language with which we can communicate with other religions, right? Uh, if you have questions that keep you up at night, like apparent contradictions you might find in the Quran, which they're not, but that's what they appear to be initially. Why are some verses exclusive? Why are some verses inclusive? Is there a way to reconcile them? I think Ibn Arabi is the best person to reconcile them in a way that's most convincing to someone like myself, at least, right? And if you have a natural love for learning about other religions, if you prefer to make connections and spot similarities as opposed to differences, if you have a love for all things that are sacred, and if you have a question of how do we make sense of all this diversity from a philosophical perspective, and if you are enchanted by the world and its spiritual secrets, its divine mysteries, this course is for you, inshallah. So I want to start with the problem of myth. Um, you cannot get into a serious discussion about religion until you address the question of myths, right? The answer to a lot of these questions is tied to myth and myth making. So, somewhere along the road to civilization and in the Western intellectual tradition, we have discarded the use and importance of myth and the imagination. Imagination is what allows us to connect to deeper dimensions of our being. And if you want to be able to engage with other religions or modes of perceiving reality, religions, philosophies, sects, creeds, beliefs, you will need to learn how to think mythically. So, in order to be balanced human beings, you need to be able to see with both eyes the eye of reason and the eye of imagination. And of course, we stress, or I stress, imagination because we are overcompensating with the eye of reason. We are superior in the use and development of our intellectual reasoning at the expense of mythic imagination, which we've, to some extent, thrown into the dustbins of history, even though technically you can't do that. Everybody's making myths at some level. And so if you're missing one eye, then you're partially blind. You do not perceive reality completely, right? And so myths and reason are complementary modes of arriving at the truth. Mythos is concerned with truths that are timeless. When I say a myth, I'm not talking about inventing a fake story. Oh, that thing's just a myth. That's not what this means in this context. A myth is something that is concerned with truths that are timeless and true with every age, or there's at least some kernel of truth one perceives in, let's say, the myth that we are talking about. And so mythology gives us a way of reading, perceiving, and understanding reality from another perspective that speaks to us at much deeper levels and it touches us at the core of our being. Like it speaks to us, I think, much more strongly than reason does, even if reason can be a bit more utilitarian, right? And this is not to denigrate reason at all. It's very important. But I think myth has a powerful, captivating hold that reason doesn't have. And so I think that's why we find them to be so compelling and magnetic. We find ourselves drawn to myths forcefully, even helplessly, because of a hidden and inherent power that lies at their core. So hence, without myth, we cannot really grapple with religion because it depends on a mythical mode of thinking to a very large extent, and not just reason. And again, this is not to dismiss the importance of reason at all, but you will not understand half of religion if you don't understand what imagination is, what is the role that mythic imagination plays in most religions, right? And so that's why I'm going to be focusing a lot on myths from all traditions in this presentation. I apologize if this is about to seem a bit helter-skelter. I'm hoping it will make sense, inshallah, in the coming weeks. So I think it's through imaginative mythology that we better connect with and understand divine experiences, right? I think this is a good place to start if we're going to talk about the problem of religious diversity, divine experiences. Myths are one gate and portal into the world of divinity. Now, there's nothing more timeless and deep, or possibly intuitive, than divinity. Perhaps some people will disagree with me on the intuition part. Divinity might not be intuitive to some people. What I want to know, but it kind of is intuitive to most pre-modern cultures, at least. Yeah. What I want to know is, what is it like to experience divinity or to encounter a divine being for the purpose of this one session, which is a good taster of what's to come. Okay. What are the sensations that you feel if you were to actually encounter a divine being face to face? What are the reactions that people have? But above all, the internal phenomenology, right? What touches your soul, your innermost being, and such that this encounter consumes your entire attention, right? That's an encounter with a divine being. What is a divine presence? What's it like to be in the presence of a higher being? Where do we encounter it? And just to note that each divine encounter has its own particular taste and unique experience. And of course, how do we encounter, or sorry, how do we account for the multiplicity and sheer range of divine experiences? Well, the subject of divinity is obviously enormous, so I don't want to get into it too much, but we can start with one dimension, one salient quality that separates divinity from all other things from an experiential, phenomenological perspective. And it would just be a simple linguistic definition in Arabic of the root meaning of ilah, which means, so this is according to Edward Lane's lexicon, he was or became confounded, perplexed, and unable to see his right course. It's something that confuses This is called hira, bewilderment. And I'm not going to go through the theological, philosophical, or kalam definitions of divinity. That's something else. That's not what this course is for, even though they are important in their own right, not to dismiss them either. They're very important for understanding divinity, actually. And then some linguists connect ilah to walaha or walaha, but not all of them do. If you do, then it also, in addition to being confounded, means being driven mad with love or grief, thrown into utter confusion, and to have a painful agitation that's caused by this divine encounter. Yearning, it causes an intense grief, causes your reason to depart you. And so, if we are to better understand religious diversity, we are going to have some grasp over what divinity means for most people in other cultures and religions. And so, I think bewilderment is a good way to approach the whole issue. And with bewilderment, in turn, uh, bewilderment is best shown in what are called divine theophanies or epiphanies. Literally, when in pre-modern cultures and stories, a god or goddess appears to you right before your very eyes. Literally, that's what the word epiphania means. The luminous appearance of a being, or theophania, the divine appearance of a being. So, most typically, you get what are called anthropomorphic epiphanies in the form of human beings, a god revealing himself in the form of a human being. And so the first example I've taken, which suits my fancy and taste, is from Homer's Iliad, which is about the Trojan War. Now, the commander of the Greek army, Agamemnon, dishonors his best fighter, Achilles, and shames him in front of the whole army and all soldiers. And so Achilles is his strongest fighter, and he's not going to take that. So he is on the verge of slaying Agamemnon when suddenly the goddess came up behind and grabbed the son of Peleus's tawny hair. That's Achilles. Grabs his ponytail hair from behind, appearing to him alone, and none of the others saw her. Who is this? This is Athena. Athena appears right behind him and grabs his hair. And so now, no one would dare grab the hair of Achilles from behind him except a divine being. And so when he feels the force of that grasp behind his head, he is forced to consider for 1 millisecond who just did that, with the sinking feeling in his stomach of who it is. And he turns around and he sees that it is Athena. Thunderstruck, Achilles turned behind him and at once recognized Pallas Athena, for her eyes gleamed terribly. And so there's an immediate recognition, right? There's an immediate recognition of who it is. He doesn't have to think about it at all. She appears to Achilles alone. This is a private epiphany. And there's sheer, overwhelming presence, terror that robs him of all his senses and seizes them. She cannot be ignored. That's the first example. Now, on a grander scale, there are cosmic epiphanies. And this is shown in a myth with a famous Hindu god, Krishna. Some of you will probably know this. Krishna has a foster mother, and her name is Yashoda. So Yashoda takes Krishna as a young boy. Now he's in the form of a young boy. She takes him by the hand and scolds him for his own good. And she says to him, seeing that his eyes were bewildered with fear, and in other words, what have I done wrong? You naughty boy, why have you secretly eaten dirt? These boys, your friends, and your elder brother are saying so. So Krishna says, Mother, I have not eaten. They are all lying. If you think they speak the truth, look at my mouth yourself. And so Yashoda replies, if that's the case, open your mouth. And so he opens his mouth, and she then sees in his mouth the whole eternal universe and heaven and the regions of the sky and the orb of the earth with its mountains, islands, and oceans. She sees the wind and lightning and the moon and the stars and the zodiac, the constellations, and water and fire and air and space itself. She sees the vacillating senses, the mind, the elements, and the three strands of matter. She sees within the body of her son, her foster son, in his gaping mouth the whole universe in all its variety, with all the forms of life and time and nature and action and hopes, and her own village and herself. She sees herself, right? There's a hadith Qudsi where Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam sees his own self in the right hand of Allah. Then she became afraid and confused, thinking, is this a dream or an illusion wrought by a god? Or is it a delusion of my own perception? Or is it some portent of the natural powers of this little boy, my son? I bow down to the feet of the God whose nature cannot be imagined or grasped by mind, heart, act, or speech. He in whom all this universe is inherent, impossible to fathom. This fear and confusion is precisely bewilderment. And so Yashoda has had a divine experience. Then you have subtle epiphanies. And I want to come back to the Iliad. The Iliad is a 10-year war, which starts because the Trojan prince, Paris, abducts the beautiful wife of Menelaus from the Greeks. So it's a war between the Greeks and the Trojans. And of course, this wife is none other than Helen. Finally, Menelaus gets the chance to face this cheat, to face Paris in a one-on-one combat. And Paris is no fighter, so he thinks it's going to be an easy battle. And Menelaus, sure enough, beats Paris in an instant and drags Paris off to the Greek camp by the strap of his helmet. And so then you can feel the weight of the entire 10-year war in that one moment. And it should be finally over, and revenge should be in his grasp. But with the most delicate touch, the love goddess Aphrodite snaps the helmet strap. And that's all she does. And in that one instant, everything, the entire war, starts all over again. And if you were in his position, that is the position of Menelaus, right, who thinks he's just won everything, you can only imagine his sheer bewilderment. That borders on panic, and panic is one of Aphrodite's children, Phobos. When you are confident that something is securely in your hands, assured in complete ease that it is yours, then it vanishes. You lose it. It slips away as if you never had it to begin with. What is that other than bewilderment, that consternation you feel? And you think this can only be the work of a divine being because I was so close. Who else could have done this? It's impossible. Then there's a third example that I like. When Athena descends from her home in Olympus to join the battle, she descends in the form of a shooting star. And so I like that image because you wonder, the people on Earth see the shooting star and they wonder, is it her? Is it not her? And there's this weird and enchanting confusion and wonderment. And then you have the obvious radiant epiphanies. Demeter is a good example. She is the goddess of harvest, who comes to visit the queen of Eleusis. Her name is Metanera, in disguise as an old woman. Then gradually she reveals herself, Demeter, to the queen, who does not recognize Demeter. She does not recognize the goddess because the goddess comes in the form of an old woman. But she gradually reveals herself step by step until the final epiphany, the final unveiling. Then from afar, a light shone from the immortal body of the goddess, and her golden hair spread down over her shoulders, and the firm house was filled with brightness like a bolt of lightning. And what is Queen Metanera's reaction when she sees this divine epiphany? Her knees go weak. If you see a divine being like that, that consumes your whole attention, and she remains speechless, and all there is awe, holy reverence, and pale fear. She goes pale. The same bright luminosity is found in Mesopotamia as well, what's called Sumerian and Akkadian mythology. If someone sees a divine aura, that's called malemu, their divine aura. But that's accompanied by another word called, in ancient Sumerian language, pulutu, which is the fear that's generated from that divine aura. It's a fearsome radiance that results in awe and devotion. It's a terrifying appearance, but that results in a reverential fear. And sometimes it's described as the fiery clothing of the gods. So Inanna is one example. She is the queen of heaven and earth, the first daughter of the moon, and the morning and evening star, which is like the planet Venus. Um, and so there are these tablets, cuneiform, what they're called cuneiform tablets, poems that are dedicated to her. And they say that she fills the heavens and the earth with light, mighty, majestic, and radiant. You shine brilliantly in the evening. Now, bewilderment can also be induced as a form of a ritualized epiphany. Ritualized epiphany. So you can create a ritual that you undertake that then results in an epiphany. Right. So there is the obvious one that's known, and they are called the Eleusinian Mysteries. If you remember, we just talked about the Queen of Eleusis. This is where she's from, Eleusis. They're called the Eleusinian Mysteries. And the Eleusinian Mysteries are an ancient Greek ritual that take place in a festival dedicated to Demeter, the goddess of harvest and wheat, and her daughter Persephone, which lasted about a week. It is a ritual that is centered around the story of how Demeter's daughter is kidnapped by Hades, and Demeter wanders the earth searching for her daughter until she is finally reunited with her. And that's obviously like a good parallel to the way the seasons work. So when Demeter is reunited with her daughter, there's spring and life flows in the earth. But when her daughter disappears, it's winter and autumn, right? So the ritual is designed to initiate devotees into the mysteries of Demeter. There are many days of preparation. Then comes the initiation, the climax of the mysteries that take place at night in a building lit up by a blaze of torches. This allowed them to see some sort of divine revelation. And the goal of the initiation was to encounter the goddess herself and gain a happy afterlife. And so on the fifth or sixth day of the festival, a huge ritual procession of Athenians and foreigners starts out from the temple of Demeter in Athens, and they walk all the way to Eleusis. And by the end of the day, the worshippers arrive at the sanctuary in Eleusis in a state of exhilaration. When the initiates arrived at the sanctuary, night fell early, and there was the flickering of 1,000 torches. The initiates watched 3 costumed people perform what's called the sacred drama of Demeter and Persephone's kidnapping, who is searching for Persephone. And so that's what they do. They walk around the compound, searching, or I guess pretending to search for Demeter's daughter. And the initiates would carry torches looking for them around what's called the Telsterion. Finally, someone strikes the gong to call Persephone up from the underworld. Once Persephone, quote unquote, arrives, that means they bring her bust, her statue, I guess. The initiates went into the Telesterion and waited for the final revelation of Demeter. The priests then show the images of Demeter or Persephone in the midst of a blaze of torches, thousands of torches. And that was the revelation. They see Demeter, her epiphanic face, illuminated right before their very eyes. And so there's a very powerful description of the experiences that people undergo from this is recorded by Plutarch when they undertake these initiatic rites. And so he says, at first there's wandering and tiresome roaming, and some fearful and fruitless journeys through darkness. And just before the end, they experience every sort of terror, shuddering, trembling, sweat, and amazement. And out of these places, some marvelous light comes upon them, and then they arrive at pure places and meadows containing voices, dancing, and solemnities of sacred utterances and holy visions. right? Now, why look into a statue's face to begin with? Well, according to their logic, the purpose is to establish real contact with the world beyond this one, and to actualize that contact, to make it present, and thereby to participate intimately in the divine. And yet, by the same move, it's also to emphasize what is inaccessible and mysterious in divinity, its alien quality, its otherness. So, according to the popular logic of pre-modern either worship or veneration of idols, when you looked at the idol or statue, you were looking at the actual god or goddess himself or herself, not just a representation of them. Now, Porphyry would beg to differ, but I think this was the popular understanding. So there's a mutual gaze. You look at them and they look back at you. They have a presence from the other world. And so Julian the Apostate describes it this way: he who loves the gods delights to gaze on the images, agamata, of the gods and their likenesses, and he feels reverence and shudders with awe of the gods who look at him from the unseen world. Now, what we just saw was the rationale for communicating with idols, or for being in their presence from a pre-modern perspective, right? But what about seeing the deity in his own realm beyond the physical world? And so there was a specific technique for doing that, right? With this technique, you would actually go to the world of the dead. You would die before you actually died. And that involved isolating yourself in a dark place, lying down in complete stillness. Now, this is Pierre Kingsley speaking, yeah? Staying motionless for hours or days. First, the body would go silent, then eventually the mind. And the stillness is what gave you access to another world, a world of utter paradox, to a totally different state of awareness. Sometimes the state was described as a kind of dream. Sometimes it was referred to as like a dream, but not a dream, as really a third type of consciousness, quite different from either waking or sleeping. And so, who undertakes this epiphanic journey to the underworld? Parmenides, in his famous poem, who Parmenides is held to be a pre-Socratic philosopher, but also there's good evidence to show that he's actually a priest of one of the pre-modern deities, Apollo's priest, and a healer and a mantis. Now, the word mantis translates into prophet, but it's not what the Muslims would call a prophet. That's a different kind of prophet. Prophet is more like a seer. He sees. And so the way I would like to describe it is that Parmenides experiences what we might call a downward mi'raj into the underworld. And so this is the beginning of the poem. And he says, this is what he says: the mares that carry me as far as longing can reach. And the word for longing is himma, this this extraordinary yearning and effort you must make to undertake this journey once you are in a state of silence and you have undergone incubation. The mares that carry me as long as longing can reach rode on, once they had come and fetched me onto the legendary road of the divinity that carries the man who knows to the vast and dark unknown. Wait, let me finish this. And on I was carried as the mares, aware just where to go, kept carrying me, straining at the chariot, and young women, who I think are the Heliades, led the way, daughters of the sun, who had left the mansions of night for the light, and pushed back the veils from their faces with their hands. There are the gates on the pathways of night and day. They reach right up into the heavens, huge, gigantic doors. And the keys that now open, now lock, are held fast by the goddess Justice. So Justice is a concept, but for the Greeks, she's also a goddess. She who always demands exact returns. And with soft, seductive words, the girls, the Heliades, cunningly persuaded her to push back immediately, just for them, the bar that bolts the gates. And as the doors flew open, they created a gaping chasm. Straight through and on, the girls held fast their course for the chariot and horses, straight down the road. And the goddess, whom Parmenides finally encounters, welcomed me kindly and took my right hand in hers. My right hand, that's a good sign. Was Habyamin mas Habyamin, right? And spoke these words as she addressed me. Welcome, young man, partnered by immortal charioteers, reaching our home with the mares that carry you. For it was no hard fate that sent you traveling this road so far away from the beaten track of humans, but rightness and justice. And what's needed is for you to learn all things, both the unshaken heart of persuasive truth and the opinions of mortals, in which there is nothing that can be truthfully be trusted at all. And so this is the goddess, Peter Kingsley says, for whom everything she's going to talk about, the stars, the planets, the sun and the moon, and this earth, are just a few flashy jewels around her neck. And so she says, when she finishes her speech, now you ponder that. And so this is a very long poem, but she's going to talk about, reveal, if you like, to Parmenides, the nature of reality, that being is one. It is indivisible. It is motionless. This is confusing. Yes, there's no motion. Motion you see is illusory. And whatever you think, it already exists. And so she also gives the revelation of logic to Parmenides. And Peter Kingsley makes the interesting point that logic is supposed to be a divine revelation that connects you back to the paradoxical nature of reality. It's not just used for utilitarian purposes on earth. It's an actual revelation. And the other sciences like accounting, for example, are also revealed by prophetic individuals. Uh, and Parmenides was able to make his journey through the practice of silence. And this technique of silence continues to this day. This is this extraordinarily kind gentleman you're looking at. His name is John Butler. He's a modern Christian mystic, and his technique is to meditate, and he finds God in the silence and stillness of that meditation. And of course, the Sheikh Al-Akbar also says that silence is what? One of the four qualities of who? The abadal, the saintly substitutes. Now, we talked about microcosmic, or rather, we talked about cosmic, grand, huge epiphanies. Well, there are also microcosmic epiphanies, where the entire world is contained and represented in something small. And so this is the shield of Hephaestus. Um, so the divine craftsman Hephaestus makes the shield for Achilles when the mother of Achilles, who's the goddess Thetis, begs Hephaestus to make the shield for her son, a strong shield. And so the entire cosmos and world is contained in the shield. And so Homer goes on to describe in his poem what's in the shield. And it's a really long description. And hats off to the artists who try to actually replicate the poetic description into the shield word for word. I'm sure it was not easy. And so what does he say? He says, the whole cosmos is in it, the sun, moon, stars, the sea, the oceans. And on it, Hephaestus made two cities of mortal men, both beautiful. And in one city, there were weddings and wedding feasts, and they were leading the brides from the chambers beneath the gleam of torches through the city. And loud rose the bridal song, and the young men whirled and danced, and in their midst the flutes and the lyres raised their hubbub. And the women standing in their doorways each watched in admiration. So he goes on to talk about a city at war, a city at peace, the castles, the farmers, the plowing, the reaping, the dancing, two lions attacking a bull. It's all in this image. If you actually look closely at it, you can find these descriptions, which is extraordinary. And so there are also hidden epiphanies. What are epiphanies in the Arabic language? This is a good question. I don't want to give it away. Yes, I will tell you what they are at another time. Just bear with me. But what is an epiphany? It's when a god or a goddess shows himself or herself to you. and it's like a shiny appearance. But it's when they appear, you know you're looking at them. And it doesn't just have to be as a human form, it can be in other forms too. But it's a divine manifestation. That's what a epiphany is. Students of the Fusus will probably know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to give it away. So I won't say what the Arabic word is. I will say it later on in the course. But if you're really that curious, just send me a message. Okay, so there are hidden epiphanies. Thank you, Zanira. That was the word I was trying not to say. Uh, there are hidden epiphanies, which by their very nature induce bewilderment. Uh, so you've got Jesus Christ, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, in the Gospel of Luke. After the crucifixion that's described in the Gospel, he comes back to his disciples in the form of a stranger whom they don't recognize until he leaves. And once he leaves, they realize, oh, that was actually Jesus, but in the form of a stranger, but they didn't recognize him. Uh, then there is, in the Greek myths, the goddess Latona or Leto, and she's the mother of Apollo and Artemis. She is the rejected goddess who is not accepted by the other deities, so she is forced to wander the earth to feed her starving babies. And she comes across a pond, um, and there are men guarding the pond, and she begs them to allow her to drink. But these are cruel, tyrannical men, and they refuse. And one of them even has the gall to jump into the water and kick the mud from the bottom of the pond to make the water dirty so that she can't drink from it. And so they don't know that she's a goddess, obviously. And so she turns them into frogs, right? So a hidden epiphany is when a divine being walks past you and you have no idea that the being is divine. And this is really obvious in the Hadith Qudsi that we have. I was hungry and you didn't give me to eat. I was thirsty, you didn't give me to drink. I was sick, you didn't come visit me. I was persecuted, you didn't help me. Shams ad-Din Tabrizi also relates a story about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. He receives a revelation from Allah who tells him, I'm going to come to your house to eat tomorrow and to come to your house. So Musa alayhi salam waits. Then there's a poor shabby man who comes to his house and he's like, I need a drink of water. And so Musa says, there's a river, you can go drink water there. So then the next day, he receives a revelation from Allah, why didn't you feed me when I came to your house? He's like, I didn't see you. And then he says, yeah, but I asked for water and you told me to just go down the river and drink. That's called a hidden epiphany. Uh, and there's the bewilderment that arises when you have a direct, unmediated perception of or direct sight of a God. You witness them without any protection. So in the myth of Zeus and Semele, she asks to see Zeus. So Semele is a human being, and she asks to see Zeus in his divine form, not in his human form. And so he reveals his divine form, unveils himself, if you like, and she dies instantly. In the case of Athena and Artemis, bad things happen in the same way. This man named Tiresias loses his sight, but also becomes prophetic. He sees the world of the ghaib. And another man, Actaeon, becomes cursed when he sees Artemis unveiled. And so one thing we can say about this is that an unmediated perception of the Godhead can damage and even destroy those caught unaware. And so this is why, can I just say something? If you're entering and your name's iPhone, please write your actual name so we know that you're part of the group, okay? Always come in with your name. Homer said, this is why Homer says, it is difficult for mortals to look upon the gods. It is not an easy thing. But there are people who have also recorded encountering them in real life. And this is a story by Peter Kingsley. He records it in his autobiographical work, A Book of Life. And so this is what he says. Each afternoon, as I came back from school, was pretty much the usual story. I take a slice of bread with a little jam upstairs to my bedroom and sit down to do some homework. But one day, I couldn't have been much older than 10 or 11. Everything seemed the same as always, and yet nothing was the same. I climbed the stairs, I knew so well, with a plate in one hand and my bag in the other. I fiddled with the doorknob, turned it, walked into my room, and was stunned by what I saw. Every tiniest detail was the way it always would be: bed and headboard, basin in the corner, curtains pulled back. The small window was slightly open above the main one, but there was something else that made me put down the plate on the chest of drawers, drop my bag in amazement. Someone was in the room waiting for me. As soon as I came in, he gathered himself and moved across to the open window and was gone. I saw this all as clearly and distinctly as I'd ever seen anything, and with my eyes, I saw absolutely nothing. That was startling enough, but what made the situation immeasurably stranger was the total sense of familiarity that swept over me the moment he left. I knew precisely what had happened without the slightest visible sign. Someone had been visiting to check on me, see how I was living, and take good note of my surroundings, observe how I was coming along. This unphysical visitor was the watcher of my life and experience, had always been caring for me, looking after me with a timeless patience no human parent could ever hope to match. This time, he was just so gently pleased, I noticed. It had only taken the softest nudge, and I remembered. Suddenly, I realized that I'd never been alone. And if your wisdom tempts you to think that this was nothing but a fictitious compensation by some young boy for his solitary existence, you don't understand that all our wise existences are nothing but a misguided attempt to compensate for this. My hands were empty. All those little things I'd held on to were gone. I sat on the bed, lost in the gap between two realities, shocked by what I'd been shown, staggered that there was nothing at all to show for what happened. And then the scent came. The smell started spreading through the room. It grew so powerful, I remember shutting the door because I didn't want the trouble of my mother asking what it was. Expanding everywhere, in perfect silence, was the most astonishing fragrance I had ever smelt. I'd never experienced anything even close to it. Infinitely more natural than any perfume, as fresh as the freshest flowers, but totally different. The fragrance behind all fragrances. And I knew without a doubt because the fragrance told me that this was his signature. This was his calling card for after he'd gone, a parting message of affection to say, yes, the things you saw were real. And it was only about 10 years later, riding in a dark bus back to London, one night um, that I started to discover other people had also had the same experience. And then he does some research and looks through books about ancient oracles and prophets. And he says, I read how the Greeks and Romans said there is one sure sign of divine presence any visiting God would leave behind. And this was the extraordinary fragrance or smell that appears as if out of nowhere, spreading everywhere it can. Okay? Those are the epiphanies. But encountering divinities is not limited to direct face to face meetings. Experiencing divinity can go far beyond that. It occurs also when you perceive God or even the divinity in question in more than one being, in one thing, not just in luminous epiphanies. In other words, when you are perceiving a divine presence and there's nothing but a multitude of wider divine presences. So I love this description by the scholar Francesca Savrakopoulou. This is how she describes it. For ancient people, perceptions of reality stretched along a continuum from the natural to the supernatural. The cosmic membrane, the cosmic membrane Separating the earthly from the otherworldly was highly porous and malleable, so that divinity in all its myriad forms could break through into the world of humans, whether it was perceived as a strange scent on the wind, a fleeting shape glimpsed from the corner of the eye, or felt at a powerful place in the landscape. How do we understand a divine presence in the wider sense? And so Thales, the pre-Socratic philosopher, says everything is full of gods. Everything is full of divinities and deities. This is how the ancient pre-modern Greek culture understood reality. For the Greeks, anything or any abstract concept that outlived one's death could be a god. Seasons could be gods, hours, dreams, justice, muses, pretty much anything that just outlived a normal human lifespan. And so Al-Biruni was very perceptive, the Persian indologist, when he says, the Greeks call in general God everything that is glorious and noble. They go even so far as to call gods the mountains, the seas, and so on. Every single thing has a presence. It is alive, it is knowing, it has a will, it is powerful, it can speak, it can hear. And so Susan Cole says that for the Greeks, the landscape was a living world, alive with the possibility of divinity. A great example of this idea lies in the existence of beings called nymphs. And the place where you'd find a nymph is called a nymphaeum. We have even, I think we have more than one in Jordan. Certainly the most famous one in Jordan is in Jerash. And so, you just look at the extraordinary vocabulary, the quantity, the number of words you have. It shows you what a culture focuses on and what they were surrounded by. That's why you have all these words. So these are different kinds of nymphs, and there's more. So the naiads were nymphs for springs, nereids, nymphs for the sea, oreads, nymphs you'd find in the mountains, the miliae, the ones you'd find in ash trees, the alcides, the ones you find in sacred groves, hesperides, the ones you find in the evening, breezes, rain, dryads and oak trees, excuse me. The Pleiades in the constellations were the companions of Artemis, and you find them in the islands, rivers, individual ponds, springs, meadows, craggy mountains, marshes. Each one has a spirit to it. And so Socrates talks about his own experience, according to Plato, by the way, of sitting in the Athenian countryside where a divine presence could be found more easily. And he talks about it. And he says, look, by Hera, what a lovely secluded spot. Then he starts talking about the pond and the water, the trees. And he finds these little statues, they're called statuettes and figures. And when he sees these, he knows that this area is sacred to the nymphs and to the river god called Achelous. And then he tells his companion is called Phaedrus, keep quiet and listen to me. For in fact, this spot really does seem infused with divinity. So don't be so surprised if, as may happen, I become possessed by the nymphs as my speech progresses. And so this is why the scholar Petridou says all these places, mountains, meadows, rivers, seashores, springs, and caves, were traditionally perceived as places in remotus. That means far away. That is, as ominous places charged with what is called interstitiality and ambiguity that invite divine theophanies. What is interstitiality? Being in between two worlds. And so we come back to Homer, and he says a very profound statement. It is difficult for mortals to look upon the gods. And so another reason it's difficult to look upon them is because they're hard to see. They are often possessed of multiple forms and disguises, or given to partial and fleeting signs of their presence. All landscapes speak. They reveal the divine and are divine in some manner. some manner, in some way. This explains why certain animals or objects are holy to specific gods and goddesses, because that is where that deity is seen, felt, or witnessed. So you would see the presence of Zeus in a golden eagle or the oak tree or a bolt of lightning. You'd see the presence of Apollo in a wolf, presence of Aphrodite in a dove, in the myrtle, of course, the rose, Demeter in pigs, right? In wheat, in mint, Athena in owls, and so on. That's why these objects are holy to them. Such objects also served as receptacles of the gods because they preserved an intimate relation with them and bore their signature, what's called in Neoplatonic terms, their sunthimata. They preserved their signatures in the manifest world. As such, they were pure specimens of divine presence in matter, and for souls suffering a specific imbalance within the administration of a divine being, the objects that bore its symbol, the sunthima, became homeopathic antidotes if handled in a ritually appropriate manner. So who talks about this? The Neoplatonic theurgist philosopher Iamblichus, right? So what is he talking about? These objects could be used to connect to those specific beings. A sunthima is an object that carries the signature that corresponds to that particular god. It is a resonance of their lords. So the theurgic rites used sunthimata to bring souls that are out of alignment into alignment with the gods, and that's a big subject, so I won't go into it. Proclus, the other Neoplatonic philosopher, describes the same kind of correspondence in various animals, plants, and minerals, each of which bears the token, the sunthima of its ruling god, its ruling lord, its ruling deity. So what's an example of that? A solar sunthima is the flower called the heliotrope, which obviously is ruled by the sun god Helios. Why is that the case if you don't know what a heliotrope is? It's the flower that follows the movement of the sun. Like if the sun is closer to the horizon, the flower's face will be down. Then when it rises gradually throughout the day up till it reaches the peak of the horizon, the flower does the same thing. It follows the sun's movement. So the sun is its lord. And so this is what Proclus says. Each thing prays according to the rank it occupies in nature and sings the praise of the leader of the divine series it belongs to. The heliotrope moves to the extent that it is free to move, and in its rotation, if we could hear the sound of the air, buffeted by its movement, we should be aware that it is a hymn to its king, such as it is within the power of a plant to sing. Hindus will do the same thing with the holy mountain called Mount Arunachala. Mount Arunachala. And they take that to be the manifestation of Lord Shiva. So this mountain is the manifestation of Shiva. And this is why the famous mystic Sri Ramana Maharshi would devote himself to this mountain and venerate it and love it. And the Quran, and we'll get into this later on, but this is the ayah. ومن بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب. Those who have reverence for the signs of God, what are called the waymarks of God, that is the taqwa, the reverence of the hearts when they magnify those places, when they have reverence for those places. And so venerating the multiple forms of divine presence is precisely what taqwa is about. When the heart strives to give that divine presence its due. That divine presence is also called Sha'air Allah, the waymarks of God, and we will come to that, not now, in future sessions. Shintoism has this idea at its very core. Shintoism has this very idea at its absolute core. Shintoism is not a religion of theories and books and arguments. It is a religion of experience. It's also known as the religion of forest and nature veneration. It demonstrates this idea of honoring God's waymarks very well. And so it becomes a highly practical religion with not much theory in it. And so Marcus Evans says, and I believe he might be quoting someone else, the magnificent cypress trees that the devotees witness and contemplate, they create within the devout an inexpressible feeling of awe and wonder. This wonder becomes the material with which Shintoism is practiced. And he says further, instead of developing theoretical explanations of the invisible world, shrines were established as sacred places to which divine beings could be invited and where man could experience their presence. Who are these divine beings? They're called kami. You could say gods, but not everyone likes that translation. And so Kenzoi Tanji, he's an architect. He describes it this way. I felt as if, like, when I went to these shrines, I felt as if I had been transported back into the world of archaic religious myths of the Japanese people. And so when you're looking at an enormous ancient tree, what you're seeing this picture of is an enormous ancient tree. That's called a shinbuku. They are revered as sacred dwellings and places for kami that come and dwell there. And so you all see this little red object, if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. It's called a tori. It's a gateway, a portal that signifies the entrance into something sacred. Now, you're looking here at a famous Buddhist temple, right? And so this is the way Kenzoi Tanji describes it. He was at Isi, and this is what he says about the place he visited. At Isi, it flashed through my mind that this shrine might itself be viewed as a symbolic form of religious myths. Here in nature dwells the gods. The myths are made manifest. The rocks and trees, the very sanctuary building themselves, are images of the deities. Yeah, so I don't want to go on too much, but you get the idea. Now, foxes are considered divine messengers of the Japanese god Inari. And so some shrines are built over foxholes, and that becomes a sacred space. There was a Presbyterian missionary in the 1930s, his name was Buchanan. He talked to a resident of the Inari mountain who described the presence of these spirits in this way. Now, foxes are sacred to the Japanese people, and so there are also fox spirits that dwell in these regions. In this example, in Inari Mountain. And so this person, this is the way he describes being in their presence of these spirits. There is a divine, fragrant, faint, burnt flesh odor. A faint, burnt flesh odor. It is easily recognized, but very difficult to explain and describe. And there's more that could be said, but I'm just going to move on. The next anecdote is courtesy of our own Sayyidina Ali Hussein. I love this one. And so it's related by the Moroccan Wali Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh in the book that's written by his student Al-Lamati, Al-Kitab al-Abriz fi Kalam Sayyidi Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh. And this is what he says. There's a wali, a saint, who saw a cat, right? He sees a cat. And this is what happens. This wali, this saint, saw a cat rubbing its chin with its paw. And then the friend of God, wali, began to weep. His tears gushed forth, and he prostrated himself before the cat, so that his tears drenched the ground in front of the cat. And to the people, his prostration appeared as if it was on behalf of the cat. But he was actually seeing God in the cat. But the friend of God, while weeping and prostrating himself, only beheld al-haqq, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the true, the real. He was weeping because of him, and abasing and humbling himself for his sake. So this is, I think, what you might call the vision, mushahadat, of tawheed al-af'al, beholding unity of God's actions, right? And so he venerated that, not necessarily the cat itself. And we have divinity perceived in the elements, and in this case, fire, which is so important to the Zoroastrian religion. Why is that? Well, radiant light means warmth and healing. And so it denotes the plenitude of health and life. That's what it symbolizes, as opposed to darkness and decay. Light also symbolizes wisdom, the wisdom that dispels the darkness of ignorance and displaces unrighteousness. And so, to honor that, you would consecrate a fire. And so, a properly consecrated fire is believed to be a spark of the light, which is the abode of the infinite, a physical epiphany of the realm of Ahura Mazda himself, who is their supreme God. Thus, fire is the living, physical embodiment of the light of holiness itself. And then the sacred temples, they're called the Son of God. And so, in addition to being a concrete embodiment of the light of the infinite, fire also epitomizes and it symbolizes the principle of cosmic order for Zoroastrians. It is the animating force of all life. And so a consecrated fire in the heart of a Zoroastrian temple is understood to be the actual presence of the cosmic life animating principle of righteousness. And this is why some Zoroastrians call fire the greatest God. Now, it must be in light of these principles and attributes that the famous Persian Sufi Ain al-Qudat al-Hamadani, he says, if it were not that these meanings have become known to me, the value of light, for example, and fire, by way of tasting, dhawq, would the thought ever have occurred to me that fire worship, idol worship, sash wearing, and the Zoroastrian religion are, from one perspective, correct? And he's a very famous Sufi martyr. And so this is, and so you even have veneration of the earth. This is an image of the temple of Apollo at Delphi. And the sister of Peter Kingsley, Maria Kingsley, has an extraordinary description of her own experience in that temple. We're short of time. I'm conscious of that. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to skip it. But for those who are interested, let me know. I will send the link to the article. But what happens, very briefly, is that she feels that the earth is suffering and she wants to know how to heal the earth. So it is in this place that she has a vision of other women prostrating and bowing down in the direction of the earth. And she realizes that that is how the earth will heal. She says it much better than I do, right? By the way, something to add to this. Ibn Arabi mentions, right? And the earth suffers because we abuse her for so many reasons, but that's what we do. The earth is constantly being abused. So Ibn Arabi says that when you do sujood, prostration in the salat, your face is facing the earth. And he says this is known by way of kashaf, unveiling. It's not mentioned in any scripture. But the reason you do that is because the earth, it says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا الْأَرْضِ ظَلُولًا. What's ظَلُولًا? We made spread out. Well, it comes from the word ظُل, which means humiliated. We have made the earth exceedingly humiliated. Why is it humiliated? Because everyone tramples on her face, whether you be rich like a king, or the poorest of the poor, or the worst kind of criminal. Everyone steps on her. And so Sheikh Al-Akbar says that when you do sujood, your face meets her face, and that appeases her, and it's a healing for the earth. That's why he says Kashif gave him. The power of these myths is really palpable. And there's a real sense of divine presence, right? And so this palpable sense of a divine presence, unquestionably persists even to our own day in one form or another, whether we recognize it or not. And this is so much the case that we have this incredible Twitter post that I came across from someone expressing an extraordinary insight, even if it's done sarcastically. And I loved it, so I thought I had to share it. It's the idea that if we work hard and excel in what we do, why is it that sometimes or almost very frequently, there is some cause for our downfall or something that goes terribly wrong? So I don't know if you can see the text, but this person says, hustle hard and become highly skilled is what people say. Why? Why should I do that? So that the goddess Athena can grow jealous of my skills and turn me into a spider? No thanks. What is the myth she's referring to? She's referring to the myth of the weaver who is arrogant. And so Athena challenges her to a weaving contest. And obviously, this weaver loses, and she's turned into a spider, but she's an extremely talented weaver. But there's a hint in the poem. So this is from Ovid's Metamorphoses that says she learned her weaving skills from Athena, because Athena is not just a war goddess; she is also the goddess of crafts and wisdom and philosophy. And so, what we could say is that Athena has no qualm with you; she has no beef with you. If you just say that these skills aren't mine, I put them in service to the person they rightly belong to. They're not mine. Then there'd be no reason for her to challenge you. That's just my thought. This is a 20th century mathematics genius who studied in Oxford. He is an example of someone who does the opposite of what was described in that Twitter tweet. His name is Ramanujan, and he dreams of the goddess Namagiri, who is a form of the goddess Lakshmi. And he is a genius in mathematics, but what he says is, I owe everything to the goddess Namagiri, who leaves these mathematical formulae on my tongue in my dreams. And then he also says the same thing about the goddess Mahalakshmi, and she's the goddess of wealth and prosperity, beauty and fertility and enlightenment. He attributes his success to them, to a higher presence. And so he says, extraordinarily, an equation for me has no meaning unless it represents a thought of God. He knows where his skills come from, where his insights come from. And so you get the same sense of bewilderment, even in this world, when you behold someone whose beauty strikes you. It reminds you of a past, previous existence. And this is where Plato is describing four kinds of madness. So one of them, four kinds of divine madness, excuse me. And so one of them is to do with love. This is what Plato says. I actually don't want to go into all this because it'll take too much time. But this is what he says. When a person sees a beautiful man or woman, he is reminded of his past life and past existence when he saw the realities in his previous non-physical existence. And so when he sees the godlike face or the form of a body, that body is a good imitation of the transcendental form called beauty. At first, he shuddered, and some of the former fear took hold of him. that fear that he experienced in his previous existence when he's perceiving the divine form of beauty. Then, as he looks at him, he reveres this person like a god. And if he didn't fear that he would be thought completely mad, he would sacrifice to the boy as though to a divine statue and a god. And so the lover saw the face of the beloved, which was flashing like lightning. So he feels this terror and falls backward in reverence when he sees that this beautiful form reminds him of the previous divine form that he saw in his previous existence. So I'll just skip some of this. Okay. Damascus, the Neoplatonic philosopher, has the same experience when he sees a statue of Aphrodite. I fell into a sweat through the influence of divine terror, thambos, and confusion, and my soul was filled with such joy that I was quite unable to go back home. Right? Um, what Damascus saw was arguably an artistic expression of Aphrodite, right? And so, is art another portal by which one can see and witness divinity? Arguably, every craft is not just art. But Anne Frank has this extraordinary description. Uh, the Jewish girl whose diary is well known throughout the world. She had an extraordinary experience that was produced by art. And this is what she says. Every time she saw a female figure, such as the Venus, in my art history book, I go into ecstasy. Sometimes I find them so exquisite, I have to struggle to hold back my tears. And there's also the question of people worshiping actual human beings in strange ways in this world. There's a Hindu who made a statue of Donald Trump. Uh, that's also a funny story, but I won't go into it now. So you have the heliotrope, cats, trees, shrines, and spirits, springs, nymphaeums, fire, earth, statues, holy mountains. They're all alive and charged with an extremely tangible divine aura or otherworldly presence. They form countless worlds in themselves. There's an American anthropologist, David Abram, who talks about this. And he has this extraordinary description. One night, when sheltering in a cave during a violent rainstorm, he became fascinated watching two spiders weaving an intricate web, creating one elaborate and beautiful pattern after another. And he says, it was from them that I learned of the intelligence that lurks in non-human nature, leaving one open to a world all alive, awake and aware. It was from such small beings that my senses first learned of the countless worlds within worlds that spin in the depths of this world that we commonly inhabit. And from them that I learned that my body could, with practice, enter sensorially, physically, into these dimensions. Right? Another way of viewing this is through the Chinese philosophical lens of a phenomenon called chaotification. I won't get into it right now, but Chuangzi has this incredible dream. I think it's in the reading list. Uh, please read it there. It's extraordinary. He has a dream in which he's confused and he says, "Am I a human being that just dreamt I was a butterfly, or was I a butterfly dreaming that I was a human being?" Which is an expression of how porous these different worlds and dimensions and boundaries are. They're called imaginal worlds. And so all this demonstrates the power of a divine presence, whether it pertains to a direct epiphany or the phenomenological experience of the broader world and all its divine, diverse manifestations. Each divine presence derives from a unique imaginal world. Each religion, each mythology, tradition, custom, and belief is the expression of a vast world and constellation of complex meanings that enables you to experience the uniqueness of that particular world. Pure Land Buddhism, they talk about these different kinds of worlds, what's called the 1,000 million fold world, and they are well aware of it. The great Bodhisattva, when he sees these worlds and the beings suffering in them, he foregoes ultimate nirvana in order to return and help them. And so he surveys countless beings with his heavenly eye, and what he sees fills him with great agitation. And he attends to them with the thought that I shall become a savior to all those beings. I shall release them from all their sufferings. And so this is very similar to what some of the awliya we've come across are called. They're called the Rahmaniyun. They have the same kind of energy, if you like. Uh, and these vast worlds are all infused with something called Buddha nature. Every being has the ability to achieve Buddhahood. Socrates talks about this kind of a world called true earth in the Phaedo, which is incredibly vast and superior to our earth. And this earth is made up of different precious stones, diamonds, carnelians, jaspers, emeralds, gold and silver, and they're abundant everywhere. And he uses the word true earth. And for those who have attended my previous course on Ibn Arabi's life, there is something called Ard Allah al-Wasi'ah, or Al-Ard al-Haqiqa, the true earth on which Allah is worshipped. And Ibn Arabi's entrance into that world has very interesting and similar descriptions. And these are the kinds of worlds that are encountered also in Orthodox iconography, right? Icons act as portals through which those multiple worlds can be accessed. Nicholas of Cusa has extraordinary, beautiful poetry on these icons. And his poetry is absolutely fascinating, but I'm going to skip it. All these worlds we have been talking about arise as a result of believing and knowing that the universe and cosmos is a place of meaning, and that beyond the physical construct are worlds of sheer meaning and tremendous spiritual power. This universe is alive, it is knowing, it has a will, and it is powerful and capable of doing great things. But in our modern paradigm, by contrast, we hold the opposite view. The cosmos is closer to something meaningless, dead, unfeeling, and we are in the tiniest corner of a terrifyingly large cosmos in which we are probably the only living life forms according to this modern view. In other words, we're all alone. Existentialism is born from that dread, this despair. And so it is the paradox of wanting to find meaning in a cold and silent universe. But as for the other religious traditions, and we're about to finish in this last section, that are steeped in a mythological worldview, these worlds are worlds of pure meaning and real. They are accessible to the highest spiritual men and women, saints, and perfect humans of all stripes. And it becomes accessible to them usually through the form of enlightenment. Plotinus talks about his own enlightenment, and he says, when he achieved enlightenment and he perceived that world, this divine world, he said, it sometimes happens that I become isolated within my soul and leave my body to one side. I become like a disengaged substance without body. I enter into my own essence, turning back into it and coming out of all other things. Then I am knowledge, the knower, and the known all at once. I see such beauty, splendor, and light in my essence that I remain astonished and stunned. Then I know that I am one part with a noble, excellent, living divine world. This is what we call Dhauq. This Japanese nun, she has a wonderful spiritual autobiography. Her name is Satomi Myodo. She talks about her own enlightenment as well. And this is worth mentioning, so I'm going to read it, and then we'll finish up the presentation. She was having doubts about her own ability. And when she did that, she says this: as I thought this, doubting my own abilities, I lost consciousness. I don't know how long I remained unconscious, but I awoke suddenly, as if from a dream. In that moment, strange things began to happen. First, and I admit it was hazy, what seemed like a life soul made of a gaseous substance spontaneously came into being and swelled up and up until it became, in the next moment, some kind of strange and unknown animal like creature, like a monkey climbing up a branch. It descended quickly. In a moment, it reached the top and bumped its head on the sky. Just then, I myself, excuse me, I myself unmistakably became the ultimate Japanese deity, I think what's called Amino Mina Kanushino Okami. This went a step beyond the spheres of kami possession or oneness of kami and person, which I had hitherto known. In the next moment, the room shrank and the universe was transformed into its essence and appeared at my feet. And then she says, "Ah, the beginning of the universe is right now. Ah, there is no beginning." The next moment, the whole world became a deep blue, glowing, and rippling, magnificent whole. And she says, "Ah, I gave birth to Buddha and Christ, the unborn first parent. That's me. I gave birth to me. I was what I am before my parents were born." These strange, intuitive worlds unfolded instantaneously, one after the other, as if boldly resolving great issues in huge strokes and with dazzling speed. So when she says she has this identification with these, with, let's say, the ultimate Japanese deity, um, that's akin to what we call fana. She had a form of fana in her enlightenment. And in the ancient religion of Egypt, they knew that the purpose of a perfect human being was to become God's representative, Khalifat Allah ala ard. Um, and so Ra makes humans in his own image in order to become humanity's representative. They have this idea, this concept. Um, and then there are the saints, not just the khulafa, the representatives of God. They are hidden, they're not known. Like Lao Tzu, he says, "People appear smart, but I appear stupid, dull, confused, so that people don't see me. My mind is indeed the mind of a stupid man. The vulgar people are all clever and bright, but I alone am dark and obtuse." Who are dark and obtuse? The Malamiya, the blameworthy saints. And there's more to say about them, but maybe I can say it later. And these saints are huge. There's a wonderful parable that's described by Zhuangzi, right? Uh, but I'm gonna skip that. And if you want to read it, please let me know. But it's about um, how perfect man, Insan Camel, is tremendous. No one can understand him, right? There's a beautiful parable about what's called the whale that then takes off and transforms into a bird, soaring thousands of miles above the earth. And no one can understand why she is flying so high. But please let me know if you want to hear more details about this parable and myth. And so the great sages are mighty spiritual people. And they're also large because of the size of their compassion. Julian of Norwich is an example of one of them. And she has this desire to save all people. And so God tells her that he can do it, despite the fact that it seems impossible because of the nature of what's called sin. He says, "I have the power to make everything right. I can make everything right. I intend to make everything right, and I will do it. You will see for yourself that all will be well." He says, "All manner of things will be well in the end." And all the saints have that extraordinary quality. Um, Lastly, there are the Bushido. The Bushido are the people who practice the way, the Tao, but as samurai. And this is a possible spiritual path if you treat it as one. It's one form of practicing the Tao. It's the path of the knight, right? They have all these codes of conduct that they follow, right? For example, integrity and honesty. If he comes across a bag of gold, even a pit of gold, he wouldn't blink. He wouldn't bat an eyelid. He wouldn't bat an eyelid at a mountain of cash. It means nothing to him. He would want to know how to return it to its rightful owner. Their gaze is on the clouds and the moon, and they are big-hearted, which makes them free to wander the world, like an immense river that knows no end, a towering mountain that shelters plants and trees and birds and beasts. This samurai person practicing Bushido is a divine warrior. He is practicing what we call the makarim al-akhlaq, the acquisition of the noble character traits. And so Ibn Arabi says, he who practices the makarim al-akhlaq, he is under a divinely revealed law, whether he knows it or not, right? Same with Aristotle, who talks about the golden mean, how to acquire the virtues. And then Ghazali adopts that later on. Again, I can explain what the golden mean is another time if you like. There's even a way of tea. You can find enlightenment in a cup of tea if you know what you are doing. This is called Chado, the way of the tea, right? Which brings together Taoism and Zen meditation. And this is why in a beautiful book, Okakura Kakuzo, it's in the reading list. He says that tea is said to be the way. This is because it is something that one learns to appreciate through feeling, not through verbal instruction. And if you practice the movements of the tea ceremony with the right frame of mind and the right movements, it can lead you to a high state, potentially, if you take it seriously enough. It's based on the Zen principle that every act of daily life is a potential act that can lead to enlightenment. And so we're going to finish off here. Why have I just rattled off through all these examples? What does this have to do with Ibn Arabi? Simple. There is not a single one of these ideas that the Akbarian tradition cannot explain or deeply engage with, dialogue with, or affirm in some way, even critique. It has the ability to bring them all together and even possibly complete them. All of them. Not a single one is missing. The Akbarian tradition, in my view at least, it's my belief, is thus a bridge to every single belief in the world, and it can be, and more. This is what I hope to give you some insight into over the coming weeks, inshallah. Thank you very much. So next week, we're going to cover the tools, much shorter than this presentation. I apologize for going over time. I know I went really over time. The next session will just be about 45 minutes, I think max, 50 minutes. We'll go over what are the tools that you need to explore this diversity in an Islamic framework, the basics of Wahdat al-Wujud, Ibn Arabi's hermeneutics, and the metaphysics of belief. And that will lead us into understanding how the Akbarian tradition connects all these myths and traditions and beliefs to Islam. Thank you very much.
Subhanallah, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, CD.
Most welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I will take questions. Go ahead.
Barakallah feek.
Allah barak fiki. And guys, I went overboard so much. I apologize. Yes, let's start with sorry, how do I read this name? Al-Bara, right? Al-Bara. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for this beautiful overview. I don't know if I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going ahead or too fast. Let me start the video as well. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah? Yes, it's working. Okay, yes. So my question is regarding this notion of divinity versus what from a Quranic perspective, as I understand it, it can also be the manifestation of the devil, as in Surah Saba, verse 41,
Yes.
that it's not true divinity, but it's an illusion, like, you know, with
Yes.
all the icons and shirk, and that, like, it appears as something divine, but it's actually the work of shaitan. So how is that tension resolved? Thank you.
Stick around and find out. That's what this whole course is about.
Okay.
You rightly point out to there's a wrong way to go about this, and there's another way where it's possible, but I won't call it right. I'll just say it's possible, and you'll see what I mean by that when we get to it, inshallah.
Inshallah. طيب, alhamdulillah. Shukran.
Allah yabarak feek. Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead. Bismillah. Yes. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, is it me?
Yes, it's you, yes.
Okay, so well, thank you so much, I guess, information. I'm trying actually to digest the sequence and the logic behind it, the rationale,
Yes.
what I'm speaking about, and the imagination and all of that. And speaking about different examples you just shared with us, I guess some of which quite contrary to the idea of divine as I understand it from Islamic
Yeah.
perspective.
Yes.
And
Yes.
one of which you mentioned about fire. I mean, I'm not against fire in principle, of course. But the question is about like Qawm Ibrahim, when they worship fire. Ibrahim, of course, as a prophet, he stands against them because that was a kind of manifestation of what they call shirk.
Yes.
So many people get confused actually. Where will you stand when it comes to divine manifestation when
Yes.
it's mixed with shirk? I'm trying to understand. So maybe because much of my
No. That's a good question. Of course. No.
learning of Islam comes in Arabic. So I'm just trying to keep
Yes.
a comprehension of what you said. So if you want to switch in Arabic sometimes, like just to provide explanation in Arabic, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'll do my best, inshallah. Of course, I think most people here speak English, and there's a few who speak Arabic, as like you said, inshallah. Allah yabarak fiki. Thank you so much. That's a very valid question. That's what we're going to cover in the coming weeks. But by the way, the people of Ibrahim, I don't think they worshipped fire. There's beings they worshipped. كانوا يعبدوا النجوم أو كمان كانوا يعبدوا ملكهم نمرود مثلا, right? So I
was mistaken. There was another story about a prophet whose people were worshipping fire, or I think it was Majus, something like that.
Yeah. المجوس صح.
With the Jahiliyyah, you have the idols actually surrounding Kaaba. And the idols in Kaaba, I'm not pretty sure how much they were different than some of the Greeks' idols or Roman idols. So there's so much confusion around that.
Some of them are the same.
Maybe.
Some of them were the same. You're right. That's what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. Yes. Okay. This was a taster. Where do we draw the line with shirk? What is shirk? What is tawheed? Where do you draw the line? We are going to come to that. Yes, precisely. That is exactly what I want to get into.
Well, that's nice. I'm looking forward for the upcoming sessions.
Thank you so much.
I get an answer.
You'll get your answer in 10 weeks. It's going to be done slowly.
I totally understand, but I'm very much, a bit very much careful about the things I believe when it comes to Islam. So that's kind of
as you should be, as you should be.
The line between kufr and iman is quite thin.
Yeah. That's why you have to know your aqidah and you have to know sharia. So we're going to come to the importance of the sharia in the third lesson.
Okay. Appreciate your explanation. Thank you, Dr. Faris.
Thank you. Don't worry, you're right, by the way. We're going to go through all of it, inshallah. Sorry, I think we'll go with Walid, then Mira, then Sana. Go ahead, Walid.
Assalamu alaikum. Could you hear me?
Yes, walaikum assalam. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a question. It's kind of like the opposite of what brother, what's his name? The other brother was mentioning.
Yes.
So my question is, he mentioned like, I guess this sort of this let's call it polytheism and shirk. I guess my question would be would it be like crazy or correct to sort of compare and contrast these sort of like polytheistic ideas or God and goddesses with Allah's attributes?
No, that's exactly what happens in Akbarian tradition, but there's a certain way of doing it. So Abdul Razak al-Qashani, some people know I've said this before, has said that, for example, Qawm Nuh, they turned Allah's attributes and they embodied them. Like the idols in Qawm Nuh, they made the idols the embodiments of Allah's sifat, like literally tajassum. They embodied it. And where does that leave us with regard to Sharia and reality and metaphysics? We'll come to that as well. Yes. And just as sorry, could you remind me your name? Is it Aitaf?
Walid?
Yes, Aitaf.
Aitaf, thank you, Aitaf. Just as Aitaf was saying earlier on, some of what we're seeing is clearly shirk. Clearly. And it is. In what way could it be Tawheed? And in what way is it obviously shirk? We're going to come to that.
All right. Jazakallah.
Allah barak fiik.
Appreciate it.
And then Mira, yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for
Waalaikum
everything. That's amazing. Okay, so it might be maybe a silly question because I haven't read Ibn Arabi in all of it. I've read some parts of it. So my question is, in his books, because you talked a lot about the myth and all these stories,
Yeah.
does he mention any of this? Because, for example, Al-Attar, if you read like Mantiq al-Tayr, you know,
Yes.
you have these stories and myths and you know, and birds. But did Ibn Arabi go through this or no? Not really. Like, I mean, because you're talking about now myth and all these
Yes.
stories, like, did he talk about the symbolic of them or something? Or no, not really.
No, so Ibn Arabi definitely did not talk about, like, let's say the Greek myths or Chinese myths, or no. He did not talk about those myths, but he meets a group of sun worshippers and he talks to them.
Okay.
He actually meets them. And that becomes a very important lesson. I think that's going to be lesson 6. And then he kind of makes up his own myth, but that's not the right word. But he makes up his own myth at some point about why idolaters do what they do in the first place. And it's very, very, it reminds you of the myths that we're talking about. And you'll form all these connections between them.
So that's why you talked about the myths now, all these myths, because eventually you will connect this later.
I will connect the idea later. Yes, the idea is, why do polytheists worship other gods? Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand why you talked about all these myths. I'm trying to understand how it is connected to Shaykh al-Akbar.
You okay. Zanira, I mean, many people from my Fusus class will know what I am talking about, but Zanira beat us to it. Okay, I don't want to get into this because I really want to save it.
I'll wait.
These myths are tajalliyat.
Okay.
They are tajalliyat. Yes.
Okay.
And then we'll get into more detail later on. Yeah. But
thank
thanks
you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Oh yeah, good night. Sana.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Faiz. You said something about you said something about logic, which I think I missed. How logic connects to the paradoxical nature of reality and how it's a divine revelation. Could you expand a little bit more about it? I did not fully understand that.
Peter Kingsley was making the argument that, our sciences that we have today, what you might call the natural sciences like biology, chemistry, and physics. You've got accounting as well. You've got logic, the arts and the crafts. He says, and so does Maulana Rumi, by the way, these are all revelations. They were revelations given to prophets, actual prophets. And they weren't given, like script writing, for example, just writing letters, language, writing language. That was given to Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, just as one example. They weren't given so that we could pursue material benefits. They obviously have material benefits, they do, and that's fine. But it wasn't their purpose for us to get lost in them and for us to exploit them and manipulate them for our own selfish purposes. And then we get lost in them. They were sciences and revelations that were supposed to give you an insight into the nature of reality. So Sheikh Al-Akbar says that calculation, accounting, the natural sciences, there is not one of these that does not have a way of taking you back to God through that science. But most people, but then he says geometry, engineering, it all takes you back to God. But most people don't know how to use them that way. But geometry can give you very interesting insights, like the Neoplatonists do. They give you very interesting insights into the nature of reality. So logic is one of them.
Right. Thank you.
And there's questions in the chat too. CD Muslim, that silence and contemplation just now that makes someone travel to another dimension, is that similar to the yogi practice of astral projection? You know, that's such an excellent question. Thank you, Sidna, for asking that. I'm not sure, but it sounds like it. But I'd have to double check. But I don't see why not. I thought of the astral plane in my mind as well when I was reading this. So I had the same thought as well. Okay. Sarah, we will not get the slides, but you will get to see the presentation again. Maybe it's a good idea to get the slides. If you want, see Joshua. Maybe that's not a bad idea. I think Kami, yeah, I'm not sure what's the singular and what's the plural. Okay. How does the Sheikh Al-Akbar explain these phenomena by non-Muslims? Stick around and find out. That was the whole point of this session. So I'm really glad to have gotten your interest from all of you. Inshallah. That's what we will be exploring in the coming weeks. That's what this whole course is about. Ghada, yes, go ahead.
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I don't know how I'm going to be saying this, but please understand me. It's a little bit maybe
Sure.
incoherent. But I heard everyone's like saying about shirk and about what is the thin line. For me, what I was hearing from you
Yes.
is whatever you shared, there is a heart opening moment about every, if you want to call it religion or aspect. So I didn't feel there is something for me which is I'm scared or I am worried. I felt there is something more heart-opening thing because there is something between the lines. If you really look at it, there is a connection for oneness.
Yes. 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 Yes, there is. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's how I feel as well. But you know what? That's absolutely true. But I will say that the concerns of the people here tonight who've raised their concerns, that's what I was trying to, I guess, pin down. That's what I was trying to work out for the past 10, 15 years. That's why I'm doing this. That's exactly what I've been trying to do for the past 10, 15 years. And that's what we're going to get into in this course. But thank you, Khalid, for sharing that. Yeah, I was hoping that it would speak to the heart as well, right? So if it spoke to your heart as well, that was exactly the point. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful comment. Thank you. Maham, go ahead.
Yeah, it's almost like the concerns that were raised were like the research question for this whole thing. And
Yes.
then what Ghada just expressed and kind of where we're going with this is like the conclusion and the result. And I'm really excited for that. This is a really, really rich session. There's a lot of like personal experiences I've had and stuff that really fit with a lot of these things that we just discussed and everything. And it was the same thing for me. Like I think the world is at such a critical juncture right now where we really need to look through the similarities, because one thing that really got me, I think 2 years ago, was this realization. I just was on my prayer mat. I just had this realization, like kind of like a bolt of lightning, that we don't think about other people like who are not us as also being under the same God. Like we know that Allah is everyone's Rabb, but then we don't think of them as Allah's, like, you know, as people who are under Allah's like jurisdiction. Like that Allah would care about them, or that He's providing for them and all this kind of stuff. And so you're in the world, you're not meant to isolate from the world. And
exactly,
like irreversibly, like you are around all these different influences and all these different things. And so this is when it's part of your environment, you need to learn how to be at peace with it, and you need to learn how to kind of understand the symbiotic relationship that you have, because you are in all of it. You are not apart from it, and neither are you meant to be. And it's the same thing. Like if you can't even do that with people, then you're not going to be able to do that with nature, with animals, with like anything, like, you know, the wider secrets of the unseen world, all of this kind of stuff. And then so consequently you will be cut off from yourself, and consequently you'll be cut off from God. And it's just this like cascading effect. And so I'm just really excited for the course and everything that like we're going to be looking at here.
MashaAllah, you've literally just spoken for the impetus, the motivation, the reason for this course. Thank you so much, Maham. I couldn't have said it better. And I really hope everyone heard that. And I hope everyone hears it. Thank you, Maham. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Steve Walid, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have another question. I don't know if I should ask it now or in different classes. It might be a really long question, but I'll let you know.
Sure.
Pretty much, you spoke of epiphanies, right?
Yes.
So my question is, like, what's the difference between someone having an epiphany and someone going through some sort of like psychedelic experience? Like, how's that different? Where does that sort of intermingle, and how do we know if it's different?
Yeah,
I think it's a long answer, but yeah.
No, that's an excellent question, by the way, because if we don't talk about crude psychedelic experiences in shamanism, you do ingest a certain plant, and that leads you to have either certain visions, or you visit the astral plane. But I guess that question goes back to how do you know what's a real vision versus a well, if we don't say fake vision, a vision that's got the ego in it, something that's of a lower plane, right? And there's so many ways to answer that question. Iamblichus, in his writings, will have criteria for distinguishing that, because they had the same problem that you're describing. Someone says, "Oh, look, I saw this really great being," and then Iamblichus says, "No, you didn't," and here's why. The Neoplatonists had criteria. I think Iamblichus listed something like 20 criteria for knowing what you have seen. And then from our own perspective, the question we would ask is, how do I know if the vision I've had is from the higher world, what's called the higher plena, al-mala al-ala, or of the lower world of the psyche that is not really that spiritual? We have our own criteria too. We do. It tends to be filtered through the Sharia. That tends to be one thing. But the real person to go to for this question is Samira Mahmoud. He's got videos of this on YouTube. He's the one you want to watch, and he talks about this in more detail. That's the video you want to watch. So that we understand what is it that we're seeing, right, in accordance with our experiences. Yeah, that's the video you should watch. I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. But yeah, excellent question.
Do you know what the video is titled or what his YouTube channel is?
No, he doesn't have a YouTube channel, but the title's not off the top of my head. I'd have to go look for it and then put it in the chat room, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakallah.
Allah yabarak feek. And yes, this ayah. أجعل الآلهة إله واحد إن هذا لشيء عجاب. Yes, that's a very important verse. I'm going to talk about it in session 10, inshallah. Thank you, Tina. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Great question, Asma. Sorry, is someone speaking?
Yeah, it's tough. Can I add one other question, please? If
Okay. Let's make your question the last question, and then we'll call it a night.
Yeah, and my question is a kind of it's quite in line with what other people mentioned in terms of different interpretation of imagination between truth and false, between what we call it in khurafa, and excuse me, sometimes actually we do have in our literature so many of stories that's merely not only fake but being somehow created. So how would you create the line of verification of some of these stories? And I speak that, rational wise, because this is kind of one of the key issues of irrationality when it comes to some of the stories mentioned in different part of our history. I'm talking about history of Islam.
Don't forget, though, I think you're talking about the myths, right? Myths, in general, not
in Arabic, it's translated as khurafa, yes?
Yes, this is like legends. That's one way of translating it. Yes.
And khurafa, even in Arabic word, the deep meaning of khurafa, it carries a kind of untruth and kind of mysterious part that fake to some good extent, even the word in Arabic. And that's actually what really strike me while talking about khurafa and all of it. Maths.
Yeah. أساطير الأولين, for example.
Exactly that part of it.
The word myth is muthos. So muthos is a narration that is likely. It's likely to have some truth in it. It's not something that you take literally, word for word, idea for idea. No, it's something that has a kernel of truth in it. That's what a myth is. It's got a kernel of truth in it. And then if we talk about the modern understanding of myth, it illustrates a timeless truth, irrespective of the way it occurs. It's got a timeless, true meaning to it, right? Like we all experience this myth in ourselves in certain ways, regardless of whether there actually is like a flying, I don't know, like God or something like that. Regardless of that, what do we experience of that myth in ourselves? And then we say, oh yes, this is a timeless truth, right? But maybe if you interpret it slightly metaphorically and don't take it so literally, but the way you verify whether something is true is not, it's called مذهب التحقيق. مذهب التحقيق, and there's تحقيق بالعقل وتحقيق بالكشف. This is the method of Sheikh Al-Akbar. You see it via kashaf unveiling, and بالعقل, right? And burhan, the demonstration through the aql. Al-burhan al-aqli, right? That's how you do it. But that's not what I'm getting at right now. I'm illustrating these myths for a reason, because whether they happen exactly this way or not, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the reactions that people have to divine encounters, right? That's what I'm interested in for this session. بس بالنسبة للمسألة عن التحقيق، it's تحقيق بالعقل وتحقيق بالكشف. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Faris.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation, and good night. See you next week, inshallah. Good night. Salam.
Thank you.
Okay.